Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. This is the place where you get both a coach's and sports dietitian perspective on topics important to endurance sports, including nutrition, training, and how these impact and fit into your daily life both on and off the race course. Your host, Coach Justin, certified run and triathlon coach and owner of Tabula Rasa Racing, along with Coach Katie, a registered dietitian with a specialty in sports nutrition and owner of Fuel to Run. Here at the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast is where your journey begins. Welcome to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. I'm your host, Coach Justin. I'm here with Coach Katie. Katie, what episode is this?
I believe it's episode 16 because
we had 16? Yeah, that's right. Okay. So this is episode 16. We probably should have talked about that before I hit the record button. But we have not come up with a title yet, but we can tell you what the topic is. So today we're going to be talking about periodized training. And what we mean by periodized training is how do you begin the process of planning out your year so that you have a well thought out approach that you're going to take to prepare for your races and to achieve whatever goal it is that you want to achieve. You may not even have any races on the books or even want to race, but you do need to give some thought on how you want to approach the coming year and approach it from some kind of like structured and well thought out way so that you can achieve some kind of goal and have some kind of measure of progress. Within the periodization, we'll talk about how we structure our planning blocks. So once you kind of have the setup of the bones or the structure of your year, how do you go about setting up the actual specific training that you're going to execute to prepare for whatever it is that you're trying to achieve? So that's what we're going to be talking about today on episode, what did we say?
16.
16.
I know it's hard because we've been doing the coaches' corners, and
I know.
So it actually is probably more like
we're getting close to like episode like 20 in terms of the sequencing, but on how we group our podcasts. But yeah, this is episode 16. So Katie, how have things been going for you? I know that both of us have kids, so we both have kids that have started this journey of back to school. So the parenting and the school-related responsibilities have begun once again, and the freedom of summer is over. So how have you been doing this week?
It's been okay. So my son started kindergarten a few weeks ago, and it's been a little rough. It's just like he's having a hard time transitioning. Just a few things going on with him with some behaviors. I mean, it happens a lot with kindergartners, but it also starts really early. School does at 7:20, and then he's been like really adamant about riding the bus. So so we've been getting up really early, and the bus comes between like 6:20 and 6:25, but he's like adamant about it. Like, he's very excited. I don't know if that's going to wear off eventually. So that has meant that my mornings are pretty early. I think the plus side of that is that because he is off on the bus at 6:20, 6:25, I can start my run pretty early now. So before I would have to kind of bring him to daycare, and then I wouldn't get started till like 8:30 or 9. And when it's hot out, that's a hard time to run, but now I can kind of get my run done, and I feel like I have like a bunch of time in the morning, which is interesting. So that's good, but I do spend a little bit of my time worrying about how he's doing in schools, and then having to pick him up and all of that stuff, is just new. So it's good. It's just adjustment. It's an adjustment, and I'm still trying to kind of keep my running going. I think it'll be good once we get into a routine and talking about like planning and periodization. It'll probably be good once I'm used to that. Next year, when I actually really start maybe training again for another marathon, I'll have that pretty well figured out. And the days I can run a little bit longer, and some days I might have to fit in a couple runs, but it's right now it's a lot. I'm trying to adjust, and so is he. So it's been hard in that way. But how about you? How is it going? Any issues?
Things have been good. So my son is a junior in high school. So actually this year, the start of the year has actually turned out to be better than previous years. He seems to be able to pull himself out of the bed reasonably on time, and so we're leaving the house on time. I can tell you that the desire to ride the bus will probably cease for Theo around the age of 16.
Or
So
before then at some point.
they no longer want to ride the bus, and they want to be driven or drive themselves to school. So I can tell you,
So,
you have that to
yeah.
look forward to.
Yeah,
So the
I'm
desire
trying
to ride the
to
bus is going to be short lived.
enjoy that because it is giving me a little extra time, to do stuff, which is nice.
Yeah.
So, I won't
I
won't
mean,
take I
I
won't
I
take
just started a little break in training,
uh
so the mentally and emotionally, I don't know how I am. So I looked back over my year so far and discovered that I only I've taken off one day this year. So, it is now in the month of August. So it's August 23rd. So this year I've missed once. And that was because I was in Chattanooga for Ironman Chattanooga 70.3, where I was supposed to do the relay swim, and the swim got canceled. And so my workout for that day was supposed to be a swim
Mhm.
and potentially a run. But I spectated the race, didn't get to swim, but I went ahead and I spectated and then nixed the run, which is not like me. And I didn't like that decision one bit, but physically I just wasn't feeling up to it. So when I started getting closer to this training block, so I'll be starting my training for Ironman Florida 70.3 on Monday. And that's going to be I think it's a 16-week plan. So I told myself I'm forcing myself to take 3 days off prior to the start of that plan. And so the first day was yesterday. So that was okay. Today, I kind of miss being on my bike because today would be my normal long bike, but been able to sit down and do some coaching stuff and some content creation for us. So I'm trying to make the best of it and keep my mind occupied and
Mhm.
not let the voices in my head tell me that I'm losing fitness over
Right.
three missed
It's like
days.
3 days.
Which is completely irrational,
Definitely.
but that's just the way that my brain is.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how things are here. So let's get started. Let's
Yeah, we can
dive
dive
into
in.
this topic here.
Dive
So
on in.
we'll first define what we mean by periodized training. And so the way that it's typically viewed is you have an annual plan, and this is called the macro cycle. And the macro cycle, you can think of it in terms of from January 1st to December 31st, that's your macro cycle. And so it's what they would call the annual training plan. So if you're in Training Peaks, they have a feature that is within there that you can tell it some of your weaknesses and some of your strengths, and it will allow you to plug in potential races that you're going to do, and it will produce your annual training plan for you. It'll give you some structure. What I typically do is I just sit down and I map it out. I map
Mhm.
out my own annual training plan, and we'll talk about that as well, because how we start to pick races, how we insert those days into the training plan, and then how do we structure training around those races is really important. So that's the macro cycle. It's the big broad view of your year. Then you have what's called a mesocycle. And a mesocycle are blocks of training, and they can be, anywhere between 3 to 4 weeks, because the reason that that's kind of the sweet spot is because it takes the body around 4 weeks to build adaptation. So once you get beyond the 4 weeks, if you have not changed any stressors on the body, your body has kind of adapted to the stress that you've been putting on it. So if that stress has been constant over that time frame, so let's say, for an illustration, let's say that you have a particular run block that you're doing, and there's a prescribed volume and intensity for that whole block for the 4 weeks. If you execute that plan perfectly in terms of intensity and volume for every single one of those weeks, by the time you get to that fourth week, your body has adjusted to what the stress that you've put on it, and you're not reaping as many benefits as you would if you would just change things up.
Mhm.
So, the body is fully adapted. And so at the end of the 4 weeks, you can change something, whether it be, you're going to change some factor of intensity, you're going to change duration, so we can increase duration, decrease duration. We can throw in different, the accumulation of your hard intervals. So let's say if you look back and say over the past 4 weeks, on the average week, I had, let's say, 3 hours of, zone 4 efforts, zone 3 and 4 efforts, higher intensity. You may say in this next block, I'm going to increase that to, what did I say, like 3 hours. So let's say you had it at 3 hours. Now I'm going to have 3.5 hours of intensity. And then how you distribute that extra 30 minutes across the workouts is how you would change that level of intensity. Or you can say, I've trained my average weekly training volume or duration has been 10 hours a week for 4 weeks. And you've just done that. And then once you get to the next block, you say, I'm going to increase my duration by another hour, so now you have 11 hours of weekly training volume and duration. So those are the mesocycles. So it's a little bit of a narrower view, but the duration of the mesocycle is a function of kind of the goal that you're trying to achieve for that cycle itself. So for triathletes, it's common to have block focuses where we say, I want to work on muscular endurance for the bike. So I'm going to do a 6-week bike block where that's my focus. And then you can say, once you get past the 6 weeks, you're like, okay, well, now I want to work on, power, and increasing strength. And we'll say, well, let's do that for 4 weeks, different than the 6 weeks that you just finished, but it's got a different focus to it. We may shorten it, lengthen it. It depends on what you're trying to achieve.
Right.
Now, within the mesocycle, you'll have the microcycle. And so if you think about it in terms of the annual plan is the micro, the quarterly approach is the meso, and then the micro is going to be your weekly workouts. It could be weekly, it could be the daily workouts. So it's how you structure the week within the mesocycle.
Yeah, so it's kind of like looking out whole, like at the big picture, and then kind of zooming slowly into like the shorter, like so, which I think is all very each of those steps is very important because you want to plan your whole year, but then you have to kind of zoom in, and then even at a weekly, like zoom in weekly, and sometimes you're planning the macro cycle, but the micro, like, that's where I think you're kind of maybe changing, even a little tweaking as you go a little bit more. But when I'm planning, like if somebody's giving me their whole year and I'm planning that, like these are the races I want to do, or at least maybe, a few big races that they're training for, then it's kind of like, okay, I'm sort of planning that out, but like, creating a basic plan based of that. That's kind of more of a macro, and then maybe the meso cycle, or like within that, what is it going to look like based off of what strengths or weaknesses that person may have or what they want to focus on. But then the micro, like you might be planning that, but I think the thing about the micro cycles is it's kind of more like that gets tweaked a little bit too within, like I'm always tweaking my own week to week. Like I'll look ahead and be like, okay, what's my week look like? And it's changing. But the macro, the big overall plan, unless something drastic happens like an injury or I don't know. So like in your case, you got a race that kind of was unplanned for, that in your year that kind of got added. I mean, that does happen. You're sort of not changing that too much, but but as you go down, I into the nitty gritty, I think those things can be manipulated a little bit within the time frame that you're in. But that's kind of how I think about it, is like big picture to like the very, like if you look at a microscope, even to the very day of that training plan, of where you're at in the next day, so that's the way to think of it, I think, a little bit too. But
so let's tell the listeners how we approach, so let's say that, I'll ask you how you approach yours, and then I'll talk to you how I approach mine. So when it comes to your macro cycle, what do you think in terms of your own training? So let's take the coach's hats off, and we're approaching it from an athlete's perspective. So how do you view your macro cycle training?
I mean, for me, because it really does depend on the race that I'm training for, but right now I am still considering the marathon. I still want to have that PR in the marathon. And so right now I'm thinking of it, I'm already kind of thinking ahead to next year, because unfortunately, or this is just the nature of the game sometimes with marathons, is that some of them sell out quickly. And so the two that I'm considering next year, both the Grandma's Marathon and the Chicago Marathon, will be like Chicago is a major, and I may not even get into that one. That's the other thing that's sometimes frustrating about marathons is that because some of them are so popular, you either have to, either qualify for them or you have to like put in the lottery and hope you get a spot, or you have to do some, work with a charity or something like that. So with that one, I'm not sure. I'm considering it. I might just apply and see what happens, but I know for sure I want to do Grandma's Marathon. That's just one I've been thinking about for a while. And so I know that one sells out fast. So it's October, around October 1st, the marathon opens up, and I want to register right away, because if I wait, then I won't be able to get into that marathon. So I'm already thinking ahead a bit for next year right now. So usually if I don't have those types of big races planned, like sometimes I'll wait. I'll do it, like a lot of people do, maybe like December, January, I start to kind of think about the next year. But for me right now, this is what I'm thinking about. I'm already planning out what my race schedule is going to look like next year. And then at this point, if I want to do Grandma's, I'm already kind of thinking. So I guess your year could be, it's, the year can be like January to, December. It could be like a
Mhm.
traditional year, or it doesn't have to be. For me right now, the year is really thinking out, okay, if I want to do a couple marathons next year, how am I setting myself up now? Like, what is my like big master plan? And then how am I going to set myself out with blocks or with different training cycles to get me to the race strong and healthy and for that PR? And then, if I do Grandma's, what's it going to look like between that, and how many days or weeks do I have until Chicago if I do decide to do that, if I get in? So I'm already kind of thinking about that. But right now I'm thinking, okay, when would I start my training for Grandma's? Like, when would I officially really start bringing up the volume? Probably sometime in February. I really want to have some consistency with my volume, because last year I did make it to like 75 miles a week, but I don't know if I can find that sustainable to do that mileage. And I wasn't able to do that more than like 3 or 4 weeks. So this year I'm like, I want to be consistent, and I want to have some consistent and sustainable, fairly high mileage. So I want to be able to ramp up my mileage to a pretty consistent volume between 65 and 70 miles a week in March, April, May. And I'll have within that some like higher mileages and then some like down weeks. But I want to have some really consistent mileage and build that up. And then as I'm used to that, that's where like this periodization comes in, because I start upping the volume, and then I'm going to start upping the intensity like
Mhm.
a little as I'm used to that volume. So that's where that adaptation is going to come in. So I'm thinking about that. How is that going to look? How am I going to ramp up that like in February, maybe January, start getting my mileage up so that I'm not doing it too quickly, and I'm getting there in March and I'm able to sustain that, and then sometime maybe April start to get my intensity up and keeping the volume. So it's just a very like it's like a strategic thought out thing that
Yeah.
I'm trying to think about for that race. But right now, that's not till February, but right now I'm thinking, what are some of my weaknesses? What do I really need to work on so that when I start that, I want to be strong and prevent injuries? So over the next couple, like I'm training for some faster stuff now. I mentioned that in our coach's corner. I think that's going to help me be a slightly bit faster. Like I'm going to have some of those top end speeds, but then I'm after October, when I do a 5K that I'm training for, I'm going to do a pretty big block of strength. Like I'm still running. I'm not taking that time off, but I'm going to be focusing a lot on building strength. So I'm going to be doing a lot of strength focus works, weight room stuff, like still running, but my volume will come down a little bit, and I'm just going to be very focused on strength, so
Mhm.
that once I get to January and February and start building up, I'll be very strong. And I think that's going to help me a lot, and faster, because I've been doing speed. And then I'll kind of go into my next marathon block. Not only a bit stronger and faster, I think just more robust, hopefully, and that'll help prevent injury. And then I do continuous strength training, but as I go into the marathon, the strength training becomes less volume of strength training, maybe a little bit less overall, but I'm still doing it. It's just not the same amount. So things kind of, it's just like certain things are more like I'm doing more heavyweight training and then that's coming down and the volume of running starts to come up. And then once
Hmm.
I'm kind of used to that, my intensity starts to come up. So there's different variables of things happening throughout from here, from where I'm at now, focusing more on speed to the strength, so and I'm probably gonna I'm doing potentially a half marathon. I'll probably take like a little mini off season where I might take like a week really easy or some days off, and then I'll kind of go finish out my 5K and then go right into the strength training. So, and that really allows me, I think, to like just have different things I'm focusing on. Like it's nice to be able, I like strength training actually. Like I like being in the gym. Some people don't like it, some runners don't. I enjoy it,
Yeah.
especially when it's crappy out. It's kind of nice to be able to like, I'm just going to go into my gym and like listen to podcasts or listen to music and like just get the weights going and I feel strong. So that's kind of how I also kind of think about this season in terms of like the weather and the conditions and what's happening in my life. And, like sometimes I even plan races around who I want to visit. Okay,
Yeah.
this is in Minnesota. We have family that just moved there. So we can also make that into a mini vacation. So it's like, like I'm thinking about it. I think a lot. I plan a lot. I'm a planner. So that's kind of, but that's just kind of the way I'm thinking about it. And if I do go into Chicago, then it's kind of like thinking about, okay, how am I going to then take some time off from that marathon? And then I'm going to have to probably in July start ramping up into Chicago. And then
Yeah.
that's all I would do. So if I do those two, I probably will not tack on another marathon. Then it's
Right.
kind of like too much,
Yeah.
in terms of that. So that's how I think of it. That's how I'm planning my upcoming training and what I'm thinking about. And just like you said, within that, I'll probably plan like a half marathon, some 5Ks maybe within my training plan, but those aren't really my A races. Those are just races I'm doing to either just like switch it up, have some fun, see where I'm at, or just as part of my training, as part of my plan. The half marathons are usually kind of just to see where I'm at, in terms of like, is my training going okay? In preparation for my marathon, I'm usually never tapering fully for those races, or really, they're not my goal race. So it's not as though I'm only doing those two races, but those are, so those marathons are my big A race, my big goals. And then within that, I am still training, I'm still doing other races. It's just none of that. Those races aren't like, they're just kind of along the way just to keep me going, keep mentally like prepared for racing and what that's like, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So that's how I'm doing it anyway for the it's probably different if I do different races or if I ever do, like some kind of ultra race again or something, which I may do down the road, but because that's a different sort of type of race, but that's just where I'm at. Yeah. How about you? Like I mean, you're like in it now. So like how is it
Yeah.
like I'm curious cuz you have a race coming in December. Like what are your thoughts? Are you going to give yourself some like what are you thinking? How are you thinking about this race?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what I typically will do is when I think of the macro cycle of my year, I typically will sit down in the month of December and I come up with a list of all the races that are on my wish list to do that I feel like I could execute. I mean, honestly, last year when I sat down to do my wish list, there wasn't a single half Ironman on there. There was no full Ironman on there. And so, I come up with a list of races that I think that I could execute and that I think that I could be prepared for. And then I look back in the history and because the races may not have like active registration dates, so I may not know exactly when they're going to take place, but I know when they've taken place in the past. And so I'll put like an estimated date on when I think the race is going to take place. And I just build a spreadsheet. I mean, I'm an analyst, so I have a master's degree in economics. So I am a numbers guy, and my spreadsheets are like some of my best friends. We spend a lot of time together. Oh, I'll sit down with a spreadsheet and I'll put where the races are within the year. And I say, okay, here's one race and here's another race. There's really only like 3 weeks between these two races. Which one would I rather do? And then I throw out the lesser of the ones so that I make sure that I'm not like overpopulating or really over concentrating a particular time period where I have a lot of races that would require a lot of stress on my body. So then once I kind of whittle it down, then I say, okay, well, how long do I want to train for the races that are in here? And so if I have a race, it's like, okay, I have an Olympic. I want to execute a 12-week training plan for that Olympic. Because I can tell you before. I can tell you how I used to do it when I first started. And I shot myself in the foot. Is that I would be training for more than one race in a cycle.
Mhm.
And so I would say, hey, I'm training for this. I'm training for this Ironman, but I'm also training for like this, half Ironman or whatever. And it was, to me, I mean, it's like you're never truly focused on a task at hand. It's like it's a distraction. And so you really don't know if, hey, could I have performed better at that half Ironman if I had just focused on that one? Or, did I sabotage my Ironman by really racing the half Ironman? Now there's nothing wrong with using these other races as like tests. And it's like, okay, where am I at in my fitness? Is there anything that I need to, fine tune? Racing a lot may mean that you're not racing to your full potential, because I feel like the training can be distracted and you never really focused solely on what a particular race would need. And so, I'll look within those time blocks and I'll color code. I say, here's my race. And so if I count back 12 weeks, I make that yellow in the block.
Mhm.
And so I see, are there any races in the yellow block?
Hmm.
Would they be reasonable in terms of like lead up races or, fine tuning races? If not, then I take that race out of the block and say it's not worth it because I'm really focused on this one down here. And once I get down to maybe just a couple races that have appropriate training links and blocks, then I say, here's my annual training plan, and then I move from there.
Mhm.
And then, I start to develop, mesocycles within that. It's like, okay, well, I know what my weaknesses are. What should I focus on in this time period of the year where, if it's January, February, and March, there are no races that are coming up. And, I'm still outside of the color coded where I really officially start training for a particular race. So I may focus on, fixing weaknesses, building strength, building power, those sorts of focuses. And so that's how I approach mine. But the issue becomes, what happens when you get these surprise events that show up, just like
Right,
what
yeah.
happened to me.
I don't get
It
very many surprise events, but
No,
see, I don't get
I mean,
you know, I don't get very
technically,
many free race entries,
no,
No, well, no. I feel like New York City wasn't like a surprise. It was so the story behind that one was I had somebody I knew that I was working with who was very involved with the New York Roadrunners Association, and I told her at some point in the late fall or maybe early spring, like, I love to do New York someday. It's a bucket list thing. Well, I wasn't expecting anything from that. I was just saying this,
yeah,
like, "Oh, yeah, it's just something I'd love to do someday. Like, it's cool you're involved." And she's like, "Well, I get like a few entries into the race every year, and would you be interested if I could get you one?" And I was like, "Sure, I mean, as long as I'm not taking somebody else's spot or something." And she's like, "Oh, no." And then April, I think it was, like, I wasn't really sure. She asked for my information, and then in April, so this was last year, not this last April, but the
yeah,
year before, 2024. She's like, "I got, like, a thing from the New York Roadrunners Association. Yeah, you're in." You know what I mean? Like, I had to pay for it. It was still, like, a $400 entry. It was very
yeah,
expensive, but I'm like, "I'm gonna do it." But it wasn't really something in my year, like, in that year, because obviously this is April already or March when I get this. So I hadn't it was kind of on my radar because we talked about it, but it wasn't something I was, like, knew I for sure I was gonna get into. So it was still, like, plenty of time because that race was early November, but yeah, in that case, it was a little bit of a surprise because I was like, "Well, if I don't do it, I don't know, maybe I'll do something else. I'll do another marathon." There's a few that same time frame I could have done, but it just so happened I got into that. So kind of, but usually it's not like happening like for you, it was like, "Oh, you gotta pick one by the end of the year." You know what
Yeah.
I so it's a little bit of a, "Oh, wow, okay, this is quick." Like, I had quite a bit of time to, like, think about it and plan my training and, like, lead into it a little bit, a
Yeah,
little
so for
different.
Florida, it was like we had talked about before. It was kind of a surprise, and it was just a last minute kind of gift that I was given. And so, um, but in order to pick, I came up with like all the list of all the races that I could do. That were still open in registrations. A North American race that was a 70.3. And, I said, well, okay, these are when these races are happening. I really have unfinished business with Ironman North Carolina 70.3, but it's in October. And so when I was making this decision, I felt like, well, if I try and do that, I have to start training right now,
Mm.
and because I wanted a 16-week plan for that. I felt like I could get myself ready in 16 weeks for a half Ironman. And so I said, well, that's really pushing it. And physically, I may have been able to do it, but I'm not convinced. Mentally, I knew that I wasn't ready. And so that's another important thing when it comes to picking races and how you structure. December's it's not necessarily a big, like, a busy month for me. So I don't typically attend like a whole lot of holiday parties and things like that. And my family, we get together for, like Thanksgiving, but we don't necessarily get together for Christmas. And so I knew that there was going to be a lot less demands on my time. And so I said, well, I think that I could get ready for a December race. And I think that would be pretty cool. And that gave me a little bit of leeway lead up to the actual official start of the training to prepare myself mentally for what
Yeah.
I was about to
I was gonna
to
say,
take
it's
on.
like, I feel like you do need a little bit of that mental preparation. Like, for
Yeah.
me, after such a long, like, so after doing those 3 marathons, it's just still taking me, it's just I'm still wouldn't be ready. Like, if somebody were trying to convince me to, say, do, like, a December race, which I would be able to have time to train for, I'm just not mentally ready, still. I think sometimes, you know, if somebody, like, "Sign up now or you got a free entry," it would be very hard for me because, yeah, I think you do need a little bit of that,
Yeah.
"Okay, this is what I'm doing." I have to, like, you have to kinda gear up for it a little bit. So, but you had a little time, so that's good. But you're training, I mean, you're taking a few days off, and then you're actually officially kinda starting on Monday, right?
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah, it officially starts.
yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of how I nerdily
Yeah.
approach my
Yeah,
schedule,
yours is a little
you know,
more,
with my
like,
with my
you're
spreadsheets and my
yeah,
pocket
your
protector.
spreadsheet.
And
Yeah. I
so
feel like I'm
yeah.
less, I mean, I like the way Training Peaks has it. Like, I do use Training Peaks as well. I mean, I'm sure there are other, like, tools like Final Surgeon. There's other ones out there that are, coaches use and athletes use for their training. But I like, because I can put the race in, and then it'll sort of tell me how many weeks or what. I know, like, I can kind of map it out in there, and I'm very visual.
Mm.
I don't know about spreadsheets, but I'm very visual. I like calendars and things like that work really well for me to be able to kind of see how it looks and where it is in the year. And so I I just like to use that, and then I can kind of count, how many weeks do I have, and then I will sometimes start to go in, and I don't, like, for what I've got going on over the next several months, I will probably put in my strength training stuff a little bit, but it'll be a little bit less structured in there. But at some point, probably in November, December, I'll start going in and sort of mapping out, looking at how many weeks do I have, and sort of start to map out what my training might look like, where my long runs might fit in. It's never, like, solid though. Like, I don't put anything in there, and it's never, for me anyways, even with the athletes I work with, it's never always like, this is permanent. It's very
Mm.
much like I map it out just to give myself a visual of, okay, this is kind of how it might look. I might put in there kind of some goal mileage that a little note with, like, some goal mileage for each week, kind of how I want to ramp up my mileage. But it's very, like, it's not very detailed yet. It's just kind of broad strokes. Like, this is just kind of how it might look. Just some notes in there, some thoughts, maybe some long runs, or just a few workouts in there, just to kind of give myself a little bit of a map. But it's not, at that point, anything very specific. Like, I might put in my base training sort of stuff for January, February in there. I just kind of again putting more specifics there, but like I will sort of map out a little bit into the whole training cycle up to the marathon, but it's very broad because I
Yeah.
things change, schedules. Sometimes I don't always know my schedules that far ahead of time. So it's just sort of a looking out this kind of broadly what I want to do, and then probably about a month ahead, or as I get into the more bulk of the training, like those March when I'm really trying to up my mileage, I might put in more in there. I mean, it maybe look a lot more detailed, but again, it's never like this is permanent for me anyway. I go in almost every week and things change. I change it. Or if I'm working with someone and they're telling me this came up, or I'm really tired this week or something like that, or I don't know, whatever it is that they're telling me, like I might change, I might have something in there scheduled, but I might change it a little bit based off of what I'm feeling or what my athletes are feeling. And so it's never like permanent, but it's always I like to plan. I'm a planner. So I like to have something sort of planned out in there, and it's probably just very vague, kind of like just like a broad strokes kind of thing. And then as I go in closer to that time frame, whether it's like a month, so it could be like just a cycle, training cycle, I will put all the workouts in, even or it's just some of the key ones at least. And then I go in weekly, and I actually update my plan and my athletes' plan on a weekly schedule. So I go in and every week I put in their workouts and change it a little bit, but it's always with the same goal in mind, and the workouts stay similar. It's just changing it slightly based off of subjective things and
Right.
schedules and all that, which changes it. I couldn't my schedule is just changing with my son and all this, like, like, I have to be that way. I can't be, like, so rigid because I have to be very flexible, because if he's sick one day, I have to be able to change it around. If I'm so rigid, like, I have to do this workout this one day, I don't know, I could really stress myself out, or it could be very hard to fit it in, and then I'm,
Mhm.
just down on myself. So that's kinda how I do it, I guess, like, throughout, like, the whole year. Like, I'm not on a spreadsheet or anything, but it's just kinda, like, broadly, what does this look like? And that's why I do like Training Peaks for that reason, because I can put in, like, little notes and just basic workouts, or just even an idea of what a workout might look like. It doesn't even have to be, like, the whole planned out thing. I might put,
Right.
like, fartlek or, like, long run or whatever, like, just a general idea of what it's going to be, and then as I go closer, I am actually structuring it out more specifically. That's just that's the way I work, but I think every coach, everybody's different. Some people like it very planned out, detailed, weeks and months in advance, but I find
It
like
also
it's hard.
it really depends on also like how demanding your life is and how
Mhm.
structured your time is outside of training. So, for instance, my approach for Florida, I'm doing something a little bit different for my approach, and I actually did a spreadsheet where I calculated my progression throughout the 16 weeks and said, okay, this is how I want to grow. This is going to be my estimated weekly volume each of these weeks, allocated across the 4 disciplines because I have strength, swim,
That's true.
bike, and run. So I've got those all allocated out. And then I went into Training Peaks and basically poured it over what I built in the spreadsheet into Training Peaks. And so I know
Mhm.
that, this day I'm going to have, a 3.5 hour bike on this day. But I don't know the details of what the 3.5 hours is going to be like. I just know that it's 3.5 hours. And so if
Mhm.
you were to go and look at my Training Peaks now, you would see like the next 16 weeks have workouts in them. You don't have any workout details. All we have is just the duration that's expected. Now,
Mhm.
I have an understanding that that can change. If, something pops up, or if I have a niggle that I got to deal with, I have to have the grace for myself to change it. And I will be honest, that's one of the things that I struggle most with. If I see 3.5 hours on that day, then that is my goal. And come hell or high water, that's what I'm going to try and accomplish. And it's been
Mhm.
a struggle of mine over the years to really kind of listen to my body and say, is my body able to execute a 3.5 hour bike ride and then still be able to do what I want to do the next day and the day after and the day after that? Even though I'm an extremely consistent athlete, I still struggle,
Mhm.
with that sort of thing, and giving myself grace, in
Right.
terms of the plan.
That's why I think
But
sometimes
but
even
I work with
coaches.
another athlete. I work with another athlete who's not like that at all. Like if I were, I tried to do it, and I tried to come up with an annual training plan. I knew the races that they wanted to do. where they fell and what goals they had. And so I sat down for like a good 4 hours and like worked on an annual training plan on like how the blocks would go and, where, how much leeway do we have in here? Everything's spaced out well. This is kind of the blocks that I would want to focus on because I know what their weaknesses are. I know what their strengths are. And then, it's now August and nothing that was in that annual training plan has been executed.
Hmm.
Things popped up, things changed, things shifted
Wow.
around, life got in the way of certain things. So it required adjustments. And so that's one of the things
Yeah.
that that I wanted to mention is like when you sit down to do your macro cycle, for that's the year. The idea is you're writing it in pencil. You're not writing it in pen. So
Right.
that you have to that's why I prefer to have athletes not racing a lot because it's
Right.
really hard to determine, how you're going to be able to recover and adapt to the stress that I'm going to put on you with your training so that you execute a good race. If you just do a bunch of races, but each of the races are subpar, you really don't know what you're capable of. You just know that you can race a lot. And if that's what you enjoy, then by all
Yeah, I
means,
mean, that's
go for it.
what I
But
was gonna say is there are people that maybe just wanna race and they don't care if it's fat, they just like that that's fine. There's nothing wrong with, like, just
no,
running
yeah,
for fun and just racing because you like to go out there and be with other people. But what we're talking about with all of this is people who really wanna focus on a race because they have a goal in mind or like in my case, I really want that PR. So if I was just out there running marathons every 4 weeks, like, great. I'm not going to be able to race that very
no,
well, right? That's not going to go well for me if I want to do that fast. It's great if I just want to do it. Fine, beautiful. Like there, and that's perfectly great. But we're not, all of this talk about training and planning is not necessarily for those individuals that are just like, hey, I just want to run. I like it. It's fun. I just want to race because I enjoy that. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, I've been there, like, I have been there, where I'm just like, I just wanna run, I don't wanna have any goals, I don't wanna have any pressure, and I think there's times and places for that, but we're really talking about the people who, like, you're looking at your year, you have, like, a couple very distinct goals in mind, and you really want either a time-based goal or you just wanna complete an Ironman or something, like, you have to really plan for that, like, it's not you can't be so I guess I hope that makes sense for people.
yeah. It's something
Yeah.
that I definitely wanted to point out, and
Mhm.
why we approach it this way, but we don't approach it this way for everyone. And so, just take that into account. So I
Yeah.
think that we've really kind of thoroughly covered, the difference between a macro cycle and a mesocycle and microcycles and how these all fit together, some of the different approaches. Katie is a little bit more, let's say, fly by the seat of the pants, a little less structured
Yeah,
than
I mean, it's structured, but
that
it's not
the anal Justin
yeah.
with his spreadsheets and his pocket protector in the basement with his stapler.
But I've learned the
Um,
hard way personally. Like, I've learned the hard way that when you're rigid structure and rigid and you aren't, like, listening to your body, like, it doesn't work out. So I give myself grace. Like, I have had to change weekends, like, okay, I have a 20-miler scheduled this weekend. Maybe life gets in the way or I don't feel quite right, like, I will reschedule. I'll try to reschedule my whole plan to still fit that in or, okay, I wanted to do 4 20-mile long runs or 20 plus mile long runs during this and I just am not going to be able to do that. I might have to settle with 3 because something came up and that's probably good enough. But it's just I could sit there and be like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't do that 4th one and my race is going to blow up." Like it's and put
yeah,
all that pressure and then be like I have to fit it in and then all of a sudden I'm overtrained because I have been overtrained before. So I think for me, it's just like I don't like to be too much too like, okay, this is exactly what it's gonna look like. I have a plan. It's just like it changes a little bit because I'm like thinking about my week. And unfortunately for me, with the way my schedule is and with my son and all that, like week to week things do change a little bit. So I have to be a little bit like flexible. It doesn't mean I still have the time to do it. It's just like this week I might have to have my recovery day this other day and this day. You know what I mean? It's just like so that the days change a little
yeah.
bit as long as I'm not backing too many hard days all together or something like that. But it's just unfortunately, and I know I feel like a lot of people are kind of that way, or I have people who they are traveling for work and they don't know always. It's like only a month ahead, so then they put in their availability in there, and I'm like, like gotta change this around a
Yeah.
little bit. So because they cannot do something on their travel day, obviously for whatever reason. So like it's just trying to be. I think you have it in there, and you can set it all in there. I just think you could put every single workout in, like, exactly how you wanna do it for, like, 3 months in advance, but I do think it's important to have some flexibility in that too, so you can kinda see how things are going, or even if you're like, "Wow, I really feel like I need a little more intensity," like, I know I
Yeah.
wasn't supposed to add more intensity for another week or 2, but I just need, I don't know, whatever it is, or I need to um, I feel like I'm kinda getting weak, like, I don't feel very strong, maybe I need to keep my strength training at a certain level instead of dropping, I don't know, like, so it's just, like, sometimes there's just things that come up or things that you aren't ready for yet, or I don't know if that makes sense, but,
Yeah.
so it's not like I'm not planning, I just know better for myself, and sometimes working with others that I cannot be too I have to have some level of flexibility in it, but it's not
I'm
you don't have to be too
envious.
flexible, right? You don't
Yeah.
want it to be so flexible that
Yeah.
it's like, "Whatever, I'm not gonna do it." I'm still very type A, I'm still rigid. It's just a little less so. I
I'm
still do it.
envious of people that have been able to cultivate that skill of
Mhm,
not being rigid, but being structured and planning ahead, but not be so stuck to that plan.
mhm,
And I will say it is a skill and it's something that requires work to achieve.
right, yeah.
It's something that I'm just now trying to learn myself as an athlete, and it's hard. It's a hard lesson to learn,
Yeah.
especially
I
when you
think
don't want to learn it. So, you know,
I think this is where it's
but
helpful sometimes to have, like, even for us, like, for this past year, for actually quite a while now, I did have somebody kind of helping to coach me when I was getting back into running after having Theo and taking some time just to, like, run for fun. Like, I was doing that for a while. I was just running when I felt like it, and then I was doing races maybe just because I felt like it, and then I finally got the bug to start really training again. And I did hire someone initially because I was busy and I just didn't wanna have to do it. And then I was like, "You know what? I could do better." Like, I know I felt like I could do better at this, so I'm gonna take this over. But even now, I'm seriously contemplating, like, do I wanna keep writing my own training plan, because I do think sometimes I can get in my own way. Like, I have kind of mentors, and like Justin, I have another running mentor, my running buddy Bob. He runs the long runs with me, and I always ask him, like, "What do you think of this? What do you think of this?" Like,
Mm.
people that kind of can put some input in, or, "Do you think I should still do this long run even though I don't feel good?" or whatever it is. And I think that's helpful. So you have people you can, if you're going to be coaching yourself, I think it's helpful to have people or mentors or somebody you can kind of run your training plan by, or ask questions about things, so that you don't get into that thing of being too rigid, or I'm going to go do this, and then you're all of a sudden so burnt out, or you're overtrained, or you have an injury because you pushed too far. Like, it is
Mhm.
good to have that. And I think for me, I'm seriously contemplating, like, do am I okay with maybe hiring somebody? Like, I don't know, like, it's hard because I have a very hard time putting m my, like, writing into somebody else's hands. Like, there's a nice thing about that. I think having a coach means that you don't have to think about it as much. Like, somebody's kind of giving you the workouts, and hopefully they're listening to what's going on and able to, like, provide that flexibility for you, and be like, "Oh, actually, I don't think you should do that 20 miler this week because it sounds like you haven't slept and you're having all these issues, or whatever, this week has been really hard, and so let's do it this other week," or whatever it is. Like, somebody's helping you through that so you don't get stuck in that rigidity. But I know for me, honestly, it's very hard to let go of, like,
think it's
my
I think
training.
it's funny that you just brought this up because it's something that I've kicked around as well, even though I enjoy doing my own training plan. Like the I like the whole process of creating a plan. And I think that's one of the things that I love being about being a coach. It's like the training plan development, the creativity that you get to have, when setting things up and sequencing workouts and coming up with different structures. And I mean, I really enjoy it. But the same thought has come to my mind too. It's just like, am I getting in my own way? If I turned
Mhm.
the control over to somebody else, maybe they would push me harder, or maybe they would push me less hard. And maybe, you know, I'm secure enough to know that and admit there's things that I don't know, and I'm fine with that. There's different approaches to training because there's more than one way to go about doing this, and I'm not
Mhm.
saying that my way is the way. I'm not saying that, it's perfect. It's working so far, but that's not to say that there isn't a different plan, structured in a different way, executed in a different way that would give me the same result or a better result. And so, I think it's funny, but I'm having a hard time too relinquishing
Yeah.
that control because I enjoy doing it
I do too.
so much. It's
I
a
love
huge
going.
time suck, but I really like
No,
doing
and
it.
I love doing it for athletes. There's something about it I love. Like, some people don't like that. I actually really enjoy going in there and try and planning and thinking about it and, like, okay, how is this orchestrating this sort of periodized plan, right? I actually think it's fun. I like to
Yeah,
plan. I like
me
to put
too.
it all in there. I know it's probably gonna change a little bit. And that part of that's like, okay, there's a challenge to that, right? Like, somebody comes at me and they're like, I don't feel that good this week, or whatever it is. I'm traveling. Like, how am I going to still try to help them meet their goal with these
Yeah,
changes and stuff? So I like that actually. And that's why I like when I've done it for myself, I think it's fun to go in and put my whole, like, think about it and spend some time, like, maybe, oh, am I gonna try out some different, like, strategies this time? Like, am I gonna try, like, I did one double lactate thing last year and it was interesting. And I'm like, I'm also very much an experimenter and I like to experiment within my own training so I know what something's like, or if it works for me, or if it's like this isn't really working, or, I don't know, I just like to try things out. And it's not that I think that's the way to train and there's just a lot of popularity. It's very popular, like, people are talking about it right now, but it's like, well, that's interesting. What an interesting idea. I'm going to try it in my own training so that I can know what it's like, and if it
yeah,
helps me, maybe, and I have the right athlete that I think that they could do it and they would benefit from it, I might try it. But I try to try everything out on myself first. And
yep,
that's the way I like to do it. And so to have someone else take over, I don't get to do that sort of experimentation within my own training, because maybe they're like, no, I don't do that. I don't believe in that. And that's fine. But it's like, but maybe I want to try it out because I'm curious. And again, it's not because I think that's the way to train, or there's any specific, like, type of training or philosophy that's better than another. I'm just I love to try, and I'm curious about things. And I think that's actually a sign of a good coach is probably somebody who is willing to maybe try on their own, or to do the research, to look into it a little bit and maybe experiment a little bit with these different training philosophies, because some of them actually may sound a little bit odd, or like, oh, well, that's kind of crazy, but I think they can work. And
yeah.
sometimes it doesn't work and it's just a bad idea. But there's a lot of stuff out there that's just a bad idea. And I usually can figure that out pretty quickly, but it's just those interesting different types of training, or back to back hard days, or, something like that. And then how does that work? Is that just leave me too tired for, I'm recovering for 4 days because I just did 2 days really hard? Or is that do something that, like, pushes me forward in my fitness? So I love
Yeah.
to do that. And that's where I don't know if I hired someone and I have all of these stipulations, like, I have to have some controller. I want to be able to put some input on what I want to do. And a lot of times coaches, understandably are kind of like, well, this is how I do things, and that's fine. So that's where I struggle, is for me personally, because that's what I love about it. And just having enough knowledge to be able to do that about, in my training, not a novice person just starting out with their training, probably should have a coach
Hmm.
initially. But when you've been doing it for so long, or when you've been like, or you have that background, or you've taken, like, you actually have the coaching certifications and stuff like that, like, I think it's harder for us coaches to hire.
That
I
is
think
true. I would agree with that.
I want to, like, I want part of me just is like, yes, like, maybe somebody will take me to the next level. Like, maybe there's somebody out there that is going to be like the perfect person that will take me to that next level in my marathon, and I'll be like, oh my gosh, why did I do this sooner? But I have a hard time because
Yeah.
I love the process of it. But yeah, kind of the side note, but
Yep.
we're right
So
there.
we talked about the periodized training. So we've
Yeah.
we've covered microcycle, mesocycle, and a microcycle. So now let's progress the conversation to where now let's look within, like, how would you set up your training plan itself. So This could be, our training plan fits within the macro cycle. So you could technically think of a race training plan, so a plan for a particular race, as a mesocycle within the macro cycle of the entire year. So that's technically a good way to think about it. But let's think of the training plan as a macro cycle. So this is the only time that we're really focused on, and whether it be, a 16-week plan, 12-week plan, or whatever. You can have mesocycles within that plan. So these are the blocks that I talked
Like
about
the
earlier.
4-week,
Yeah,
roughly.
the 3 to 4 week blocks that are within the plan itself, and then you have the microcycles, those each week. But there can be, I don't want to say that there are, I want to say that there can be distinct phases of a training plan, because whether all of those phases are necessary is going to be a function of the athlete that it's either you or the athlete that you're working with. So, for instance, I'll just briefly talk about what those phases are.
Mm-hmm.
The first phase is what's called the build phase. Typically, this is not sport specific. So you are building a foundation, and this is just a fitness foundation. Typically, the way that you can think about this is that, this is like your off-season time period. So you can say, but that can change when I get to the last phase of a training cycle, which is a recovery phase. You could think of that as your off-season. But let's just, for sake of this conversation, let's just say that the off season is a good time to focus on base building. So you can do things like strength training, trying to fix weaknesses that are within like the foundation of your fitness. So let's say that, my goal as a cyclist is to be more efficient at climbing hills. So let's say I'm interested in racing Lake Placid, which is a really hilly course. So I want to be able to climb hills well. So in your base period, what you would do is you could focus not even getting on the bike. Let's just leave the bike to the side. You can build that foundation in the weight room. So there are specific movements that you can implement, that you can put into your plan, that will allow you to build power, strength, and muscular endurance, those are the 3 things that you're going to need to conquer a hilly route. So you can say, I'm going to, and since we're a cyclist or a runner, we're focusing on single leg movements. So these could be single leg presses. There could be single calf raises, single leg extensions, prone calf curl, or prone leg curls, Romanian deadlifts, things like these. These are the things this is what you're going to be focusing on during your base build. So you're laying the foundation that you're going to build your house on top of.
Mm-hmm.
You can also, this is a great time also to incorporate some cross training.
Right.
So
that's kind of what I'm going to be doing in my
Yeah, so let's say that you're
November,
a runner,
December,
and
yeah.
you're using this base period, and say it's like, I don't want to subject my body to the demands of running, but I want to work on things that may help me become a better runner. So I've got my strength stuff. Maybe I'm going to throw in a little bit of elliptical work, which is a non-impact, but it's close. It's fairly close to the actual structure of a run stride, but without the impact. And so you say, okay, I'm going to give myself some elliptical work, but it's going to be structured. No holding on to the handles. I'm going to do forward strides and backward strides. So I work on full leg engagement, where I'm shifting focus from quads to hamstrings, and I'm building the power in the glutes. And no holding onto the handles. So I'm requiring my body to engage the stabilizer muscles in my core. And I'm going to be working on my arm swing, which is going to highly correlate to the cadence that you're going to be running with. So these are all the things that you can do in your base period to lay the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the duration of your base is really going to be determined by your current level of fitness. I will tell you now that I have been working on my base period for about a year. And this was after like all my shoulder surgery and my elbow surgery and kind of like the recovery from that. So technically, to a certain extent, I'm still in. I still have a component of base training within my training plan, even though I'm actively training for races. So I don't want you to think that there's like, these distinct phases. So once you finish a phase, you move on to the next one.
You're not going to do strength, like you do the strength, and then you're not, like you're still doing it. It's just not the same amount. So you're still, yeah. Like, for me, it would be, like, during my strength phase, I might be doing strength work 5 days a week. Like, I might be doing it almost every day and some level of it. But then when I start to transition into the next phase, it's gonna start to decrease, and by the time I'm in that full marathon, like, build where I'm maybe 12 weeks out or so, like, it's maybe twice a week, maybe a little more, but usually about twice a week. I'm just focusing on a couple very distinct muscle groups like in my legs and just a few exercises to, base like maybe squats and deadlifts and maybe a few other things to keep myself strong. Maybe some box jumps or just like dynamic movements, but at plyometrics, it might go from like 4 or 5 hours a week of strength. Like that's a lot, but like maybe 3 hours a week of strength training to 4 to like maybe 1 to 2 at the most,
Mm.
So and probably closer to 1.5 at the most. So and this cross training I think you bring up is a good point because this is, I think, a really good time in that base training you still want to work on your cardiovascular fitness, but you still might want to do some running, like you still could, but maybe you're just doing a little bit less of it because you're focusing on strength and then maybe you are doing some cross training. And this is a good time. You don't have to do anything that's very specific to running at this point. I think, like, I have a rowing machine, so I do a lot more rowing because it's just fun and interesting. I'm still building my cardiovascular engine. I'm not really doing anything focused. It's not really helping with my run stride, obviously, but it's helping with strength and then maybe arm strength a little bit. And I am helping to keep my cardiovascular fitness. I might get on my bike, I might do things like that. But as I get into the running, those things will be far less. Like
Yeah.
if I still may row a little bit, but it's not going to be nearly at that same level. So that, I think, just kind of want to mention it. I think this is a great opportunity during that base phase to kind of really maybe build into running a little bit if you've been taking some time off, but also try other things, to keep it interesting. It kind of gives you a little break too. You keep fitness, build strength, but work on whatever your weaknesses are or whatever. But it's a good time to just do something a little bit different. Hey everybody, this is Katie, and I am jumping in because we have decided to split this episode into 2 parts. So we're concluding the episode here, and then we're going to finish out with part 2 starting next week when we upload that episode. So for this episode, we are kind of ending on the base training portion, but next week we're going to go into a lot more detail on periodization of the plan and a little bit more detail on how we do that and kind of rounding out the episode there. So please stay tuned for that. And as we conclude today, I just wanted to mention that since we didn't bring it up in the beginning, that we would really love your feedback, reviews, leaving us a rating on wherever you listen to your podcast is super helpful. So please don't hesitate to leave us a review. We don't take any money or have any sponsorship or anything. And if you want to check us out, you can go to our podcast, the Endurance Journey podcast, or for Justin, to BulaRasaRacing.com, or for me, if you would like, Justin does mostly like triathlon running training plans. And then if you want to come over and check my website out at fueltorun.com, I do mostly nutrition, nutrition counseling, but I also do training plans as well for runners. So if you want to check us out, please do so. You can also join our Facebook group, the Endurance Athlete Journey group on Facebook. So there's 2 different Facebook accounts, and our group is especially for if you wanted more of a community. So please check us out there. And otherwise, I look forward to seeing you again next week for part 2 of our training periodization episode. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a fantastic remainder of your week.
Listening to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. Feel free to leave us up to a 5-star review on iTunes and Spotify because leaving a review really helps others like you find us. Visit the podcast website for other episodes of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast at enduranceathletejourney.buzzsprout.com. Have questions or comments about the podcast? Send Coach Justin and Katie an email at theenduranceathletejourney@gmail.com. For all things coaching, visit Coach Katie at fuel2run.com and Coach Justin at tabularasaracing.com. Again, thank you for listening to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast, and remember to find joy in the journey.